Welcome to another episode 4
Heyo.
of All the Horrible Things. I am your host, one of your hosts, Chris Pagnosi, and with me
is Enan J. And today we are focusing on tech-based horror, which we were kind of inspired to do because both of us have just gobbled up Archive 81, which is hitting big on Netflix right now.
Archive 81. That's to me, I think is if there was still a water cooler situation going on, people would be talking about Archive 81 around this water cooler. I was a big fan. I really had no idea what it was about, anything going into it.
Mhm.
I did know that James Wan was around it. He was the producer. And then I did a little research and found out that it was this hit podcast, which
Right.
I feel embarrassed that I haven't heard
Which I
it.
guess has a lot of differences from what I've been reading. And it makes me very curious to go
interesting.
and actually listen to it because from what I'm reading online is the people who love the podcast are dissatisfied with the show.
So this is the equivalent of the book readers being upset about the film adaptation.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is a new thing. This is, I like the podcast better.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely made me curious. There's a lot of elements that have changed, specifically the lead character, Melody. She is an LGBT character versus our very hetero girl here in Archive 81.
That's a really big,
it is because it's a big part of what goes on in the show. Her attraction to one of the nefarious fellows and then the betrayal there. I'm curious what sort of dynamics play out in the podcast instead of what we saw.
Oh man, I would love to know what they were thinking on that one.
Additionally, another big part, because Archive 81 leans heavily on demonology, I guess you could say. Perhaps I wasn't clear on what I was reading, but it made it seem like there was not demon stuff in the podcast as obvious, at least, as in the show. And it was something different that was, I guess they're kind of calling it the static, more of a monster than, or a static being than what we clearly get, that this is a god, right? That's somehow able to be summoned when there's a comet that's coming by the Earth at a specific time. So I'm curious how the podcast deals with the origin of this static monster too, because I'll be honest with you, when I suggested we talk about this, it was after I'd seen the first 2 episodes, which I loved. And I had goosebumps all over the place with it. I didn't want to watch it alone, honestly, because it was freaking me out these first couple episodes. I will say the last 2 episodes were not good for me. For me as a whole, I like the series, but I really felt like they dropped the ball in the latter episodes. And I guess the first half of the season was written by a certain team, and the second half was written by another team.
Oh, interesting. You know what I think I would have liked to have known was maybe even at the beginning when I first started watching this, if there was going to be another season. And I think that may have helped me through those last couple episodes as well. I too was not the biggest fan of how the second half of this season played out. I'm really curious. I really want to listen to the podcast now and focus on maybe we didn't need the demonology because we're listening and our brains are doing most of the work and coming up with our own idea of what the static monster looks like. But obviously with a hit television show, you need something to visually represent the evil.
Yeah. I think it probably plays to a broader audience, and it's less ambiguous than maybe what's going on in the podcast. But let's talk about, why do you think it's such a huge hit on Netflix right now, in the top 10 now since it came out?
Well, I think, with the success of all of these true crime and mystery podcasts going on right now, I think there's this new wave of just really good sci-fi mysteries they're popping up on television, especially. I think if you looked at like basic cable, NBC and ABC are really doubling down on mysterious sci-fi shows. I would have to guess that it was because of this podcast genre that is really creating this serialized mystery.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you bring up. You were wondering if it's going to continue on, and the sense I'm getting is that it is. But I
Yeah,
will
yeah,
say I liked it so much early on. As it was coming to a close, I was telling myself I kind of want it to wrap up because I want answers and I want to feel like
yeah,
there's
yeah.
nothing's left hanging because there was already so much left up in the air that it was a little troubling when we got to that end. But we'll talk about that in a second. How would you like describe it to people? Because when I kind of
Oh man.
didn't know you had already seen it, I thought it was like The Shining meets The Ring would be like the best mashup because it
Okay.
has such a um, focus on the location, specifically in the present, actually in the past too, the
Mm,
Visor apartment building, but then that secluded location where he's actually fixing the tapes. I loved being
right.
there for the majority of the show. I found that a very compelling location.
Yeah, that location sort of reminded me of the main setting of the sci-fi movie Ex Machina,
Yes.
um, that sort of took place in this uh, new. It was a like contemporary location. It was like built in the '60s, but almost modernized, which is also a really weird thing about sci-fi. I think that setting really works. It's almost like combining the old and the new, um, as a setting, with all the cameras.
Yeah, no, it was a
Uh,
really fascinating compound, and it actually reminds me. Apparently, like as a big part of it is this like uh church that's kind of built into it. That like the
right, right,
that's
right.
not in the podcast at all. There's no Christian stuff at all in the podcast apparently, which I found interesting.
Well, I think when they introduce this, you know,
The demon
evil
stuff.
that is represented by demon stuff, you have to counterpart it with the good and the light,
That
right?
makes sense.
Um,
Oh, and he did demand to have access to that, claiming he needed that spiritual space himself, which then enabled him to get to
right.
all the archives.
Yeah. Yeah. It worked as a writing device for the
True,
characters.
true. But let's talk about how compelling the main dude is. I really don't know how to pronounce his name, so I apologize if I butcher it here. Mamoudou Athie, as our character Dan Turner. I mean, I was totally on board with him throughout the whole thing. He was just so stoic. With the
Yeah.
exception of maybe the final episode where it not his fault. There was no overacting. I thought he was nailing it and really adding an intensity via his performance.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think one of the main reasons I was pulled in was because of his performance. I mean, you're following this guy who, has this what they kept describing as like a breakdown,
Mhm.
um but still had it together. Like you really believed this character. This actor was fantastic. And you know I think we have a new star in our hand. I think if someone else was in this role, it wouldn't have been as successful. Certainly not someone that we were familiar
Right.
with. I Yeah, I thought it was just
No, he
great.
carried it. He carried it. There were a lot of other good players, including his buddy, who I hadn't seen before, but I guess it was he's in some ABC show, How to Get Away with Murder. I think his best buddy
Oh,
Matt McGorry, who plays Mark, really fun character too. I'll admit,
yeah.
in the early episodes, it was like, oh, he's definitely one of the bad guys. He's in
Right.
on
I
it.
was just about to say. I was just about to say that, and that is attributed to his performance. But I thought the same thing. I thought this guy is has got a better deal going on with somebody else, and he's willing to throw his friend under the bus.
Right, but it was actually refreshing to see how far he went for his buddy. I mean, it was a solid
Yeah.
bromance in the end that was really kind of a complex one too, because his buddy is like super rich, has his own horror podcast too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
they had an interesting dynamic, and then I at the end of it was rooting for their budship.
Yeah. I think, knowing that, it takes place in New York, and I think when we first see his friend's apartment, my question to myself was, how could this guy afford this
Right,
place? It was massive, and everything that I've heard about New York is everything is small. So
yeah,
you knew from the get go that this guy
man
is
of
has got
means.
some money.
Yes,
Yeah,
trust fund baby
but
probably.
yeah, willing to use that money to help his friend. That
Yeah,
was
no, it was refreshing. Like I said, it was an interesting, secondary male part that caught me off guard. I was expecting it to go a little more cliche than it did, so I did appreciate that. So that's
yeah.
in our
What did you think about?
present. Are you going to talk about the
Yes.
Visser. So we're going back to 1994, I think it was, which is where our secondary story is taking place. This is where the story in which
Yes.
is put on these VHS tapes that he's been tasked to repair and make playable again because they kind of burnt up or they were subject to smoke um, after the Visser apartment building burned down
Right.
back in 1994. So we have our main girl Melody, played by Dina Shihabi, and then her best buddy, who I thought was next to our main dude Dan, maybe my favorite part of it. Julia Chan is Annabelle. I thought,
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's not likely, but she should get a supporting nod because I really enjoyed her performance.
Yeah.
Her character goes through a lot.
Huge arc there, from the get-go. She played that best friend so well that you thought they actually had this history together.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, as far as like any characters that have gone through the most change, I think she showed more than some of the leading characters.
I completely agree. I honestly think she softened Melody's character for me. I don't think it was probably easy to seem like you were friends with Melody because she was so Melody in a way that I didn't really like, to be honest with you. It was a struggle following her. I wanted to care more about her, but frankly, Dan watching her and caring for what was happening made me care for her too. And then you had that backed up by her buddy Annabelle. So she was kind of, I feel like, saved by her ensemble.
Yeah. I would say that's exactly right. You nailed it right there. That because of Dan's obsession and care for her, it really made it a lot easier for us to want to see her succeed as well. What did you think about the villain Samuel?
Creepy dude, super creepy dude. He looks
super creepy dude.
Very familiar to me, but I couldn't place him myself. Have you seen him in other stuff?
Yeah, I feel like I knew him from something else as well, but I don't think I do. I thought he was a good performance. I will say, from the get-go, you're like, something's off about this guy. Even when she first enters the Visser and he's just standing out there, something is off about him. So even the moments where you're supposed to think like, oh, maybe they do like each other, I'm like, no, this isn't working.
Yeah, their whole relationship I felt was ham-handed, and it does make sense given that they didn't have one in the podcast, so it was kind of forced. I didn't feel their chemistry at all. But granted, when they do have that episode where it seems like something might take off, he then gets with one of his fellow cult members in the basement after arguably the creepiest scene in it for me, which was the basement first ritual where they're all there just humming that melody, that scary little ditty that they do. I don't know, for some reason that really got me. And then the statue that was in the vestibule thing, oh my goodness. You never really get a close-up of it, but it just looked horrifying. I don't know, it just looked really creepy to me.
Yeah, I thought they did a good job of giving this statue this archaeological history to it that that could have been dug up. It looked real. I certainly wanted to know more about it. And they, especially from the get-go, you find it it's in the cabinet, and they just lock it up. It was a good way to keep the audience guessing. And I'm assuming in the podcast there was no statue.
I'm not sure about, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It was such an essential part of the show, though. I mean, that was one of my favorite parts, especially when you see the effects when they finally do the ritual with the blood like going the opposite of gravity.
Oh yeah. It's going up and around.
That was one of my favorite effects for sure.
That reminded me of the Blade. Was it Blade 3 or was it the first Blade where like they needed all the blood to run through for Frost?
Is there something similar that happens at the end of Cabin in the Woods too, where all the bloodletting sacrifices blood has to be?
Yeah, I think you're right.
So yeah, I thought that was pretty effective, but I'm going to take back that was the scariest scene, because honestly, for me, at the end of episode 1, when we first get our look at this static demon, when he's looking at the footage, the first time you see that really got me. Like, I know it's a trope, it's almost cliche to see it. I just thought the design of this head looks both alien and demonic at the same time, which kind of makes sense if it's associated with this comet. He's coming from
Yeah.
outer space in some ways, there's associations there. But just that shape of the head, man. Oh my goodness.
I'd be really curious to find out, you and I grew up where TV static was a normal thing. Uh, Even as a kid, you find yourself sometimes trying to stare through it, but that's no longer a thing now that,
True.
television's coming through a different way. I'm curious if it's more effective or less effective to somebody who is, didn't grow up with TV static. Is it creepier for them to figure out there's a image within the static? I'd really like to find that out.
I think it probably holds up. And plus, just like, some people haven't even watched VCRs, or VHS on VCRs, where you
Right.
get those static lines, which are kind of
Yeah.
disturbing in their own right and give it such a feel.
Yeah.
But Poltergeist, I think, really highlighted static being
Yeah.
horrifying the best.
You're right.
And then, of course, there's that Michael Keaton movie from 2005 where he's hearing white noise, and then
Yeah.
demons are able to communicate through
Yeah.
that. So I don't know. The blue screen is still pretty scary. No, just the plain old blue screen. That's still around. No,
I think
Is it?
so.
Maybe not. But certainly not the DVD bouncing stuff. Or they don't have the same sort of static images that they did then. It's a shame.
That is a shame. I mean, it's probably not a shame. That means they're getting a better picture than we
Even
ever
the
had.
color bars back on those old TVs, that was kind of a freaky thing. Sometimes that meant there was like an actual emergency. Sometimes it was
like an emergency going around. Yeah.
Right.
Like a purge was about to start.
Yeah, when there's not fluid moving images on a TV, it's unsettling in some way.
Well, there's something just very interesting about just the idea. I mean, I think this goes back to some of the older sci-fi movies that even with an audio waveform, that there is a message coming through. It's the unknown, right? That the idea that something could be traveling through a broadcast is still very creepy. Which is, I think, is why this is so successful.
We don't know what's at the other side of a black hole. To me, it's reminiscent of that.
That's true. That's true.
We don't know what's on the other side. Very exciting. Very exciting. Yeah. Anything not do it for you? Because I was going to mention another thing I read that was driving some of the podcast fans a little nuts. If you notice, it's not consistent when she's filming them and when he's watching what she's filming, because about 50% of the time she's pointing the camera at the ground, and then what he's looking at is a dead-on shot. So that was a little maddening from a production standpoint for me.
I could definitely see what you mean by that. I think one of the things that bothered me, at least from the start, maybe it was just frustration, was that it didn't necessarily make sense how Dan was seeing some of this, like does it happen when he sleeps? He's walking throughout this compound and then all of a sudden it's changed around him. And I wish there was a little bit more explanation about this blending of these two worlds.
I completely agree. And the biggest example of what WTF stuff with time, I felt like, was when he's watching the video of the psychic woman relaying the conversation that they literally just had with her spectral being from the other dimension. Then he pops the tape back in, and there it is, exactly what they just said coming through her. It's like, what was on that tape then before? I don't know. Like, did it manifest then, or how does that work? That was a little confusing.
I will say, the actor who played the psychic,
oh my goodness.
There were some really creepy scenes with her, especially with the scratching of the face.
Yes.
Very well done.
Even
very
she
well
was
done.
great in bed after she scratched her own face off pretty much. You can't even see her eyes.
Oh, yeah.
And you got Melody next to her bed, and she's telling her, don't let it out. Don't let it out.
Yeah.
Don't let that freaking alien demon out. Yeah. What's the name of the demon? For some reason, it's evading me right now.
That's like a great
Kagar or something. Ugh. I know what was funny is the name of the comet is Kron, but then when I saw like it written, I was like, oh, of course the comet would be named Karen. Karen the comet.
Karen. I was thinking L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh, this makes sense. Yep. Good old Scientologist.
Could be something there. Could be something there.
Too true.
No, I don't remember the demon's actual name though.
Yeah. I guess it's not that important.
That's okay.
Last two people I want to talk about though are on the one end of the spectrum, each of them, in terms of kind of good and evil. We got Jess, who's ultimately supposed to be the sacrifice at the ceremony in the 90s.
Right.
Essentially what acts as the second ceremony in the entirety of the show. They have one ceremony to bring forth this demon back in the 1920s, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then again in the 90s. And then, of course, in our final episode, they do it again. And it's a lot easier this time because they have an insider helping them.
I got a witch. I've got a witch.
Exactly. The Badung. One of the Badung. I think it was the Wiccans' names. Do you like Jess? I thought she was good for a child actor.
Oh, I thought she was fun. Yeah, I found myself caring more about her than our main characters at times.
Completely.
You know.
Yes, I did care way more about her than Melody. But the fact that Melody cared so much about Jess once again made her character more acceptable for me.
Yeah, like
other end of the spectrum, though, we got the guy who kind of sets us all in motion, at least in our present day context. Martin Donovan's Virgil.
Oh yeah. I like him as an actor.
Yeah. What do you remember him the most from? Because I really only remember him from Weeds.
Oh, okay. Man, he's one of those guys that I feel like I've seen in so many things. Yeah, I think he's just in everything.
Yeah, and he always tends to have this kind of brooding, ominous presence. I thought he was effectively cast in this one.
I think, he's always got this ambiguous thing about him where you're like, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? He's always walking that line. And I didn't necessarily buy him as him and the other character being brothers.
No, I'm with you there. Yeah,
I mean, that was an interesting casting choice for that.
Agreed. Yeah, because he doesn't come off half as creepy as his younger brother, Samuel. And interestingly enough, I'm hoping that this was consciously done, but Virgil is a character most important to Dante's Inferno. He's the one that walks our protagonist through hell.
Oh.
So he's kind of like, I'm hoping that connection is actually there.
Yeah, that's a good call. That's a good call.
Okay, we got to talk about the end, though. My goodness.
Yes, I was just going to say, because it gets just very... Okay, are you talking about the actual end that feels like a post-credit scene, or are you talking about like the whole...
Yeah, all of it. Let's talk about all that goes down in the latter half of that final episode. So there didn't need to have to be sacrifices, right? In the first two ceremonies,
right,
there is an innocent, it seemed like a virgin character that gets slaughtered to then bring forth our alien demon from another dimension, which was unclear to me too. What was going on there? Because
it was very unclear.
He did have the capacity sometimes to start to pop through the TV a la Samara, but it's like, could he go all the way if he wanted to, or do you not have to do this ceremony? And
it was just a thing to creep us out, you know?
Right. That it was unclear about, and that was obviously the biggest connection to the ring. Was kept popping out. It was effective though. I mean, some people are saying it was corny CGI, but I don't know. It got me.
Oh, I don't think I thought it looked pretty cool. I think anytime you're pushing through static, it's going to look weird anyway. But you do have to wonder, like, is he so close through the television static that he couldn't just come through there?
I know.
Instead of this major production of waiting for a comet.
Yeah. So actually, the comet stuff was all BS too, right? Because ultimately, our character Donovan was able to emulate the circumstances with technology there at the end.
Correct.
So he had the witch and he had the bypass with the tech, and the comet was superfluous at that point.
And I think you've got to see that they're really just making fun of the idea of what people believed in the past, like the things that they would do, like the actual sacrifices in human history that they would actually occurred to a comet or to something that it had no, it had nothing to do with what they were actually trying to accomplish. It was just sad that they thought, killing somebody was gonna get them what they wanted.
So yeah, then we got our buddies. They go down and they're gonna do it because he's now totally obsessed, like you said, with Melody, to the point he's gonna put his own life on the line and
Yeah,
get into the plane of existence that she's trapped in, right? And his buddy comes along, and then the
right.
next thing we know, Bobby, the Badung witch, pops down there, and she's looking real mean, holding a gun, looking like she's about
Right.
to just take him out. And then it's like, oh, we all want the same thing. Cool, that was
Yeah, this is convenient. Yeah.
that was frustrating for me. It's like, why are you guys not on
Yeah.
the same page? I don't really understand why you care that Martin
Yeah.
Donovan's almost dead. It's like, what?
I kind of wish they would have given us something a little bit more. I think as an audience, we knew something else was going on with her.
Yeah.
That she's potentially the mother, but she shows up out of nowhere. Just a lot of questions there that, like, Virgil knew who she was. Just some weird
so
stuff.
Virgil
She
did know
shows
that
up.
she was Badung, that she was a witch?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, how does he not know? The guy knows everything.
Right, because he has vials and vials of Badung blood, which is essential to the ritual,
Right.
housed in that big old fridge.
I just wish they kind of would have explained, like, her being at the right place at the right time fit a little bit better.
I completely agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
But okay, so end to end, they're successfully able to open the portal, and Dan jumps in, and he's kind of like seduced then, because apparently this demon is lonely and he needs a friend to hang out with him. It was funny because that's what Bobby essentially said. She's all like, yeah, he's gonna try and keep you with some trickery, so don't fall for it.
Yeah.
But I will admit, it was creepy. He had his old family there. He himself is older, but then he's got his younger sisters there now, and his dad and his mom. And I feel really bad for the actress who played his mom, because she had all of a scene and a half in the whole series.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I thought it was effective, him kind of like waking up to, oh, okay, wait a minute, I'm under kind of the spell.
Yeah. It kind of reminded me of some of the stuff that you saw in the movie Insidious, where Patrick Wilson's character has to go into I forget what they got a really great name for it. It's like the Further.
Okay, yeah.
It potentially where it looks like the lights are off everywhere you go, and yeah, you're gonna get tricked. You're gonna want to have to stay there, which there's got to be some sort of more biblical meaning there, like the devil will do anything to get your soul. But I do like the fact that they did bring his family back, because what could this guy possibly need? Like, he's just offered a ton of money to do a job, but the thing that's missing in his life is his actual connection to his family and not knowing what happened to them.
Right.
So I did enjoy that scene right there. If we're gonna knock this ending, that was the one.
That was one of the better
thing
moments, for sure.
Yes, exactly.
I completely agree. So then he goes and he finds Melody trapped there, and she's coloring in her coloring book or whatever. What's she doing? She's on the church floor.
Yeah, she's in the church. She's waiting. Okay. She's essentially waiting. I think she's been waiting this entire time, right? There's and there's this whole time difference, right? Time moves differently here.
Yes.
Of course.
So she still looks exactly the same as she did in the 90s.
Right.
And then they're trying to find a way out, and they're listening for the ring of the tuning fork, which is creepy. I love a good tuning fork infused into any
tuning
horror.
Forks. Yeah.
So then we get to the most prickly moment. Play it out for me. What happened there? So they hear the ringing.
So you're talking about how Samuel just appeared.
Samuel's stuck there too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So Samuel's been there this entire time. I don't like how they didn't. I mean, where has he been? Right. Like, wouldn't he have been right there with Melody? I don't know. I mean, that was a little too convenient for me. Like that whole last bit there was like choose the door, um, and Samuel, which also I don't like that they didn't show us what happened to him.
Mm-mm.
You know, like okay, so Melody makes it through the correct door,
Right.
and Dan doesn't.
Well, here's what I don't understand too: is wouldn't Samuel want to be there? Doesn't he like this demon guy? Isn't this like
Yeah, he tried
his leader
everything.
to get to him, and now
Yes,
he's going to
yes,
run out, essentially saving Melody by going through that door, by
yeah.
grabbing her?
These are questions that have to be answered in a season
They
2.
do. There are some
They
theories out
have to
there.
be.
I felt a little validated because my initial instinct was, okay, if she made it back to the present, he went back
Yeah.
to the 90s, maybe Samuel got sent back to the 20s, where the 3 openings of the portal were. Maybe each of them went back and they got a time paradox, so he's going to go all the way back to the 1921 and be reemerged back then when it was first done. Otherwise, he
Okay.
should have showed up with Melody, right? He should have been there when
Yeah.
Melody came back. And then Dan getting sucked into 1990s didn't make sense to me. But there's also the possibility Dan didn't make it out. Dan is still in there.
Well, that's where my brain's going, right? Because he was in the 90s already. That's where he found Melody, right?
Mhm.
And they confirm that by showing us the World Trade
Right.
Center. And he just wakes up in a different room. So I think he's just still there.
He's stuck still. I would
Yeah.
prefer that to be the case, but to me, it really felt like they were making it seem like he's back in the real world in the 90s and just went through the wrong portal.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
So yeah,
The Samuel
here's
question is the
confusing
bigger
thing.
question for me, because
Yes,
where is Samuel?
100%.
Why did Samuel want to leave? Was he dissatisfied with his God?
I guess. Maybe he's been neglected. Although, how long has it felt like he's been there? That's the real question.
That's a good point.
You know, maybe it's only felt like he's been there 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Those are the confusing things. It's the same thing. It's the same problem sometimes we have when you've got like a time travel movie.
Yeah, the paradox.
That
Time
you've got.
paradoxes.
Yeah, it's just yeah. It's like okay, the writers are controlling what we see, but we as an audience have to know some of those rules. Otherwise, we're a little
Right.
confused.
That's okay. I'm compelled enough to want to see the next season, because I would have preferred to have it all wrapped up in a nice little bow, to be done with it,
Yes.
because I really don't know how
Yeah.
the second season is going to work.
Yeah, having said all of that, I still enjoyed it to the point where I want to see more.
Yes. Yeah. Mostly because I just want to see more of some of these characters, which are really strong.
Yeah, see some of the characters, get some questions answered, and punch a demon in the face.
Yes. Who doesn't want to do that? But most importantly, Archive 81 got us to think about all the tech in previous horror. What's led up to this point that's
right
alive on Netflix right now that's made it such a big hit? And there's a fairly big number, but I would say in the grand scheme of things, tech horror is a smaller subgenre than other subgenres. It's more niche. I think it's probably harder to sell.
Yeah, it is, and you can look at a specific decade, and maybe the technology wasn't there yet. You know, so looking back on it, it doesn't hold up.
Yes, and if you don't mind, I'm going to take that opportunity to talk about the film that I found that was the oldest, that was both horror and tech hybrid, is called Demon Seed from 1977. And I don't recognize any of the people in it. So we got B actors in it. Some surprisingly what looked like expensive effects, I'll admit that. And it took itself crazy seriously. But what I didn't realize is I had seen this premise in a Simpsons episode and didn't realize that they were spoofing Demon Seed. So ultimately an AI is created back then by this scientist who wants to create the AI so ultimately he can help with diseases and, you know, for altruistic motives. But he's getting a divorce with his wife too. So he leaves her at home and this AI essentially latches onto the computers at his house that he's not, and he's no longer there, and it pretty much just takes over the house and traps this woman in there, becomes obsessed with his ex-wife to the point where he wants her to have his baby or its baby. So it's so ridiculous because we're talking about computers and electronics from the late 70s. So literally you have
Yeah.
a wheelchair with a robotic arm attached to it and a camera on the
Yeah.
top that's moving around and controlling her. And you can shoot lasers out of like
Of course
light
it can.
sockets and stuff. Absolutely absurd. Can shut all the windows. It was worth watching. It belongs with a mystery science theater. It needs to be watched as a mystery science theater film because there was so much absurdity going on in this, and there are
Right.
multiple scenes of this robot wheelchair like violating the main woman. It's like I didn't even know what I was. It was like hard to watch. I mean, it's not like super graphic by any means, but what's insinuated is ridiculous. And then they'll cut to scenes when he's essentially inseminating her with his robot spermies. And then it goes into this like,
Wouldn't that be just like some battery acid?
he's got multiple like instruments to use, and then eventually there's
Instruments. That's nice.
eventually he becomes more of this like cube-esque being that is able to move around, and it's kind of reminds me of like an old child's toy with different shapes that you can move around. So it's like this big metal apparatus that then has like dominant control over the space too, so it can actually like knock people over. And that's where the baby, after it's grown in her, is then kind of like further grown in this machine, and then it comes out and it's like half machine, half baby. But then as they get closer to it, they like are able to peel away the machine parts, and it's just a little baby. But it does.
It's a normal baby.
Well, actually, it's not even a baby because this machine has made it so that the child was growing at like 9 times the speed. So in 28 days, it pops out of the woman. And then when it goes into the incubator, that's the machine, then it comes out of that like a 6-year-old girl. You know, it's not even a baby. She's a girl. It was at first I thought like they tried to make it look like there's wires coming from her head, but it was just this big long red hair of this little robot girl. I don't know what to say about it other than avoid it or don't.
Yeah. I think the weirdest thing about this movie is it's based off of a Dean Koontz book.
Is it? Oh, that explains a lot. The Evil House.
I know this Simpsons episode,
right?
too.
Did you know that was based on?
No. I kept thinking it was, or if I'm thinking of the right episode, I thought it was making fun of like Space Odyssey.
Oh yes, yes. Well, in this movie, there are a lot of scenes that's what I was trying to come up with, Space Odyssey-esque imagery, where it's like going through space, especially during the insemination stuff. Like you then are suddenly in the womb and seeing like a robotic penis thing come into the redness, and then there's triangles floating everywhere. It's ridiculous. Nothing sexy about it at all.
No.
Yeah. So that's Demon Seed, 1977. That's kind of when it began. In the 80s, though, there's a good chunk more.
Oh, sure. I mean, one of my favorite 80s horror films, Chopping Mall, is technology running amok in a mall, because there was nothing more popular in the 80s than a shopping mall. And they introduce a new security system, and it's just a fleet of these robots, because in the 80s robots were all the rage. You've got the robot in Rocky that as a kid I was like, oh man, I want a robot.
For sure. Even like the stuffed animals had robotic implants, like Teddy Ruxpin and stuff. They were all getting they were getting hybridized.
Yeah, it's just so funny that the 80s was so, set on advancing technology, and to an extent it did, but nothing like nothing life changing like the early 2000s or with the iPhone. You would think that would spawn more horror movies, the iPhone, but no, the 80s spun Chopping Mall, Terror Vision.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's not one I'm
there's
not
a
familiar with. Are you familiar with TerraVision?
yeah, I've seen Terror Vision. It's been a long time since I've seen Terror Vision, but yeah, it's very
Okay.
campy. It's almost like if you remember Pee Wee's
Yeah.
Playhouse. It kind of reminds you of like this over the top
Oh, interesting.
Pee Wee's Playhouse monster.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sure there's a ton in the '80s that we could talk about,
Yeah,
but
the only one I wanted to mention
um,
in the 80s beyond that, because we're going to talk more about his films later, is Cronenberg's Videodrome, which now is kind of, I think, a struggle for me to watch, mostly because James Wood is the star.
I was going to say the same thing. I hate
I hate
James
James
Woods.
Woods too. But when I did watch it initially, I didn't know what a crackpot he was and a horrible person, and I was able
Correct.
to stomach it more. And it is kind of groundbreaking. You ultimately have video that gives people malignant tumors because what they're watching is like the worst stuff to be watching. So it's like kind of a
Right.
moralistic body horror with
And it has one of the most memorable, shocking scenes with the stomach and the James Woods got his hand like, ugh.
yes,
I mean, that's Cronenberg for
for
you.
sure. And the undulating TV, you can't go wrong with anamorphic TVs. I think it did what it
Right.
was trying to do pretty well. But yeah, then let's just
Right.
jump to the 90s. And I tortured myself this week and watched Lawnmower Man from 1992, a Stephen King book. What I'm going to say is I got through it. So it wasn't like the worst. You did have Pierce Brosnan, which I found funny because when we're talking about that episode of The Simpsons where the house is demonic, that's Pierce Brosnan's voice of the house.
Oh
The
boy.
voice of the house in Demon Seed is not
That's
nearly as
right.
charismatic. But yeah, Lawnmower Man, you have Pierce Brosnan, who's also working on AI sort of stuff that gets infused. It's essentially like the Matrix. What happens in the Matrix where they're able to just kind of like shoot knowledge into your brain, right? So he picks like the
Right.
biggest dolt that he can find, and this Jeff Leahy's character, and starts. This is after he kind of has a falling out with the company he's working for because the army or the armed services are trying to take advantage of what he's doing to use it for militaristic means. So they end up
Right.
killing one of his chimps. So he's out and he goes on his own, takes this dolt that's the Lawnmower Man around the community, and essentially just imbues him with so much knowledge, too much knowledge. Suddenly,
Too much.
he's getting laid because he's just oozing confidence now. And
Nothing sexier than intelligence.
there's the weird subplot with him and this neighbor lady that he cuts the lawn for, and then she takes advantage of him kind of when he's stupid, but then he gets super smart and is like, come on into the VR lab and then we'll have like the sexiest of sexy times. And then he like in the machine becomes a monster and is doing horrible stuff to her and like essentially puts her in like a sex coma forever after that. Really strange subplot to it. But one of the highlights is, remember the FBI agent, the brother-in-law in Breaking Bad is in it, and he's kind of the head of the military.
Oh yeah, Dean.
He was himself. He was good.
He's great, and Dean Norris.
Okay, yeah.
Dean Norris. And if you go back and you watch just about any '80s movie, he was in it. I mean, he was in like Lethal Weapon 2. I mean, the guy was just around. But you know what I wanted to question was like, do you see Lawnmower Man as like an updated version of Flowers for Algernon?
Oh, that's interesting. It does have similarities.
You know
Yes.
the idea of someone who's not intelligent and then who at a rapid pace becomes
Right.
the most intelligent.
Yes. That's a really good comparison. I do see that. And that's why I hated to
Also-
admit it while I was watching it. I'm like, this could be done again better. This
Yes.
could become more
And it's
believable
probably
and better done.
probably should be.
And probably should, because it's such an iconic name. you know, but the execution of the
Oh
film is
yeah.
just so piss poor. You have the worst graphics. I don't know if you remember how once the Lawnmower Man is able to become like a CG image that's anywhere in the real world,
Yeah.
he's able to kill people essentially by turning them into vibrating bubbles, and then they just float away. It's really
Classic Stephen King. We all float down here.
touche, touche.
We all float.
But I could see them doing that same effect with like this kind of like string theory, taking advantage of like all the vibrations. They could pull that off way more effectively than was
I
done in
think
that film.
this is a job for the internet. Whoever's listening out there, let's get some sort of campaign going to remake The Lawnmower Man.
That'd be awesome.
Because I think the thing about this movie that hurt it so bad was that they weren't there yet with the
I think so,
technology, like
too.
you were just saying.
Yes. And
The
the
other thing-
performances, like it was a little uncomfortable.
Yeah,
having,
well,
'cause,
there's that.
I mean, they got the language that they're using the R word back then, willy nilly for the
Ugh,
character, and
yeah.
it was just uncomfortable the way it was played. I feel like it didn't work. It didn't work. They'd have to take it a little different direction.
This is at a time when Stephen King was maybe doing too many drugs.
Yes. Yes, for sure.
Because what I want to say is, well, also this all like his stories from that time have to deal with like paranoia. But have you ever seen Maximum Overdrive?
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay, so this is Stephen King's, I believe, his directorial debut. And even Stephen King admits that he doesn't remember making this movie because he was doing so much coke.
Oh my god.
But this movie is about a comet passing Earth, and it turns all appliances into living beings.
My goodness.
You know, like, and it stars Emilio Estevez. It's a really fun movie, and basically it takes place at a truck stop, and I think that's called like Dixie Boy or something, and all the appliances are trying to kill humans, and there's this massive semi truck that's, you know, it's really over the top, but was based also on a Stephen King short.
That's
and
really
I
interesting
imagine,
because I was doing a little research. I wasn't able to watch the episodes, but there's one episode of Twilight Zone that sounds very similar to that. It didn't involve a comet, but it has to do with all appliances suddenly becoming sentient and attacking their users.
Sentient. Thank you. Obviously not living beings, but
Right,
yes,
just
it
aware.
turns the appliances
Able to
yeah
come at you with their cords.
Yeah.
So after Lawnmower Man, I went and I watched Ghost in the Machine, which for some reason I didn't remember at all. Like I hadn't seen it, but I didn't remember it being a thing. Did you catch it when it came out in '93? I think I was distracted by Jurassic Park in '93 that I didn't catch it. But it does have Margot Kidder, which, you know, from Indiana Jones fame. It was interesting to see her in a horror, and she was pretty much the highlight of it. I said you got a serial killer that kills people based on what the person he killed left their address book. This is when people actually used to write everybody's address in an address book. So he'd go around and just like completely destroy everyone in the subsequent address books. Well, somehow he dies in a graveyard, of course, in a car crash, and now he is attached to the new program for MS-DOS that allows you to have a digitized phone book. So, of course, it has the phone book of Margot Kidder and her little brat kid who's using really rudimentary VR too, and he starts killing off their buddies and their family. The other highlight of this one, beyond Margot Kidder, is the mom from Arrested Development. Bluth is in it, and she's a delight to see, so much younger and equally as hilarious, honestly.
Yeah. I can't think of her name, but she is amazing and recently passed away. That's almost worth watching the movie just for her.
The kid is really, really annoying. You'd recognize some of the secondary players too. If you remember from The Burbs, kind of the jolly, larger dude who's kind of goofy. He's in it as like a boss, a really serious role that it didn't suit him in this. But in the way that I felt Lawnmower Man could be redone, Ghost in the Machine should be forgotten forever. And
Well, both of these movies you're talking about, it's funny. It's like people were writing about the fear of
Right.
technology turning against them. It's, I mean, basically today's theme. But it's so funny though that in the '90s, when certain things were being just more readily available, like using a
Mm-hmm.
computer, and then you know what, it's turned into a horror story.
Evil Address book. Spirit. Yeah, didn't work. Didn't work. And then the following year, a film called Brain Scan came out. I was excited
Yes.
about it because it had a really good premise. Ultimately, it's a VR interactive CD-ROM disc that's sent to your house as a kid, and Edward Furlong is our lead in this one.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
tosses it in, and he
And
has a very realistic experience of like living out being a killer, being a murderer. But of course, he has been hypnotized by the flashing screen, and he is actually doing these murders, which in
yeah.
itself had potential. But then they throw in this like Howie Mandel ridiculous trickster character who
The trickster,
the
right? The
trickster
trickster.
with the most absurd hair, and he just like ruins any hope for this movie to have any chops because he comes in there with a ridiculous voice, ridiculous look, and is like the corporeal being that's also able to jump in and out of the TV, that's pressuring Edward Furlong into doing.
Yeah, well, basically, they were trying to create a new Nightmare on Elm Street. You know, the trickster is Freddy Krueger.
Yes.
Instead of your dreams, he's coming out
That's
of
exactly
technology.
that's the best way to put it. It was 100%
Yeah,
Freddy
yeah,
Krueger in VR, but it sucked.
yeah.
It was really, really bad. But the one upside
Uh,
of it was Frank Langella. I was shocked to
he's so
see
good.
him. There he is as the detective, who's sussing out what Edward Furlong's up to.
There's one thing you could say about that man is that he'll probably, you know, with any performance, he will commit to it in the most ridiculous, like you should. But that man is a committed actor, so he will sell the hell out of Brain Scan.
Yeah, I mean, decent premise. Get rid of the trickster, more Langella, and you would have had something worth watching. But I do think it could explain why Edward Furlong just disappeared, because it was an embarrassing role to be in.
Well, it's like
It's too
Pet Cemetery
bad
2
Edward
as well.
Furlong really does have his own like vibe to him, and just wasn't able to apply it to anything beyond Terminator. It was a bummer. Let's jump to the
That is a
end of the
huge bummer.
90s, because you watched this one,
Yes.
right? Recently.
Existence.
Another Cronenberger.
Yes. And I will say this about this movie is that if it came out a year earlier, it would have been huge.
I know. Yeah.
This movie came out right after The Matrix, did it not?
Yes, and The 13th Floor. So you have 3 films that are coming out around the same year, all with the same premise.
Yeah.
But I like Existence much better than The Matrix. Sue me.
Oh man, you just broke the internet. To all the people listening to this.
Effective. You got actual actors. You know what I mean?
Well,
that are interesting characters.
You do. You have somebody who's just, hitting it, Jude Law.
Right.
And I don't know if this was before or after Talented Mr. Ripley, but if it was after it, I think he had just come off of a nominated performance. Yeah. So you've got Jude Law, you've got Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Always good.
Always good, but in a role we haven't seen her in usually, as this almost like a Sharon Stone, like this. There's a better term for it. I was going to say like the sex appeal
she's
to
like
her,
a sultry alpha.
Yes,
is the best way to put it. That is ultimately she's the one that is designing these VR games. But what I love about it, because it is Cronenberg, is the device itself. So imagine like an Xbox that looks like wiggly kidney.
Yeah. How do you describe this thing that you like sit on your knee and then you plug it in?
It's very sexual looking. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It looks like flesh, and then it gets stuck into a port in the bottom of your spine. So it's
also this port at the bottom of the spine is. You could say that. It might even be like a butthole,
That's
really.
true.
But there's a lot. there's a lot of touching
a
it.
lot of lubricating it too.
Lubing it up, very over the top
Gratuitous.
sexual acts happening to this hole.
Lubing up, yes. That being said, I love this film because it really is so unpredictable. I felt like it kept taking us in directions that I never ever thought it would.
Movie has you guessing the entire time what is real.
Right.
And then the little details, I don't even know if they're little, but the things that I was picking up is that, and I think they were like thrown out there for Cronenberg to like give you clues along the way, but like the motel is just titled Motel.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
that's supposedly in the real world, right? Or no, that's within the sim. Okay.
That's within, and I think everything within has very generic names. I mean, Willem Dafoe's name is Gas.
That's right.
I mean these names that are just given are just so generic, but that have you questioning what's going on.
That's right. And Willem was the one that ultimately who wanted to put a legal jack in their back, right? A legal port.
Yeah,
but then he turned out to be a nefarious person himself.
Yes.
And it had all these cute little like beings in it, like little creepy crawly things that were like cute. Almost like Wes Anderson on acid kind of characters from Life Aquatic. You know what I mean? It was...
yeah. Like the cute little things in Jurassic Park too that don't end up being like all that cute. But
for sure.
I mean, this movie, like I said, would have done better if it had come out just a little bit. You could tell, like, that if you look at Christopher Nolan, Inception could have been inspired by this, like questioning reality, what's real, what's not. But with just really great cast, really great premise, really interesting body horror. I mean, the gun that is like bones that shoots teeth.
Oh my gosh. It's like never seen it before.
Is disgusting.
It's gross and cool.
Jude Law like nibbles on it like a chicken wing to expose it at one time. Like
it's super gross, but you can't look away.
Super gross. But that's Cronenberg. Right. Like that's him. It almost, I don't want to say almost ruined his career, but it almost I'd say it set him back. I don't think he had gotten it didn't make money. I looked this up. It had a $15 million budget. It only made like $3 million.
Wow.
2.9 or something like that in its release. He took him a while before he kind of came back, and I think his comeback movies were not Cronenberg films. Right. They were Eastern Promises and History of Violence, Eastern Promises. Those were the movies that put him into like the box office again. But I would say this, this movie could have been as big as his other film, The Fly, if it was not surrounded by The Matrix. And there's another movie I think that came out around the same time that this sort of like, overshadowed it.
Yeah, it is a shame because of the three that were the big name ones, to me, Existence is the richest. It's the most dynamic. And of course, at the time I loved The Matrix. I rewatched it again going into the new one that just came out. It doesn't hold up the same, man. I mean, it's not.
Well, let's talk about that similarity to this movie, because I almost feel like this movie inspired The Matrix 4 or whatever we're calling it.
A good way to think
the idea of creating this video game that deals with reality.
It's more meta. Existence is way more meta, which now the new Matrix deals with too. Yeah, that's
absolutely.
Comparison.
But one would not exist without the other, perhaps.
Right. I'm glad you brought up The Fly because we kind of did skip that one, and that is technically a technology horror as well.
It is. Also, you could say that The Fly, it's a remake, is original. Like that might have been tech, but that was sci-fi more than tech horror.
I feel like Cronenberg's had definitely more horror elements. Teeth falling
the body
out.
Horror.
Oh my gosh, the hair, the fly hair popping out. Ooh. Yeah, that gave me the willies, and that holds up. I rewatch The Fly every other year because, oh my gosh, just Jeff Goldblum at the table with her, just putting sugar packet after sugar packet after sugar packet
Oh my
into his
God.
coffee is that's such a great little speech there.
It's alarming.
It really is.
It is
It really
alarming.
is. Well, let's start wrapping it up a little bit. Do a little speed
Yeah.
through the rest of the films that we kind of wanted to highlight. We
Yes.
both tackled Pulse. There's two Pulses, one Japanese from 2001, and then the 2006 new one with newish one with Kristen Bell. You watched the new one, and what's your take?
Oh man, it was bad. It was bad. It was also, I think, it suffered from technology some of the same way that Lawnmower Man did, because it was dealing with something that has changed and advanced so much. It's dealing with the internet, and what about the idea of ghosts trying to contact us beyond the dead through the internet, and just really not good. And the crazy thing is like you had a pretty solid cast.
Yeah.
You had some really fun actors who were like had a comedic background.
The look was even pretty decent, I mean, Wes Craven was a co-writer of it, which is frustrating. Yeah, because
it was
didn't live up to expectations.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's not worth it.
I mean, I'll admit I started the new one and I got maybe a quarter of the way through it, and this was after I started the Japanese version. And I gave it considerably more time. Like I got at least halfway through it. And with the exception of like the ambiance and the tone, I just wasn't into it. I couldn't really attach.
It's very dated. And I think that's the problem is like, maybe if I saw it when it came out, I would have enjoyed it more. Yeah. But now when you go back and you watch something and like the music doesn't make sense, and the technology of like the dial up and the cell phone, the flip phones or Motorola Razors, whatever they had, it's just I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's maybe why it's such a smaller subgenre, is because it's hard to make it last. It's hard to give it life, like beyond the epoch in which it was released.
Yeah, like an evergreen type of idea. Right. It's exactly it. Like that is exactly it. You can't get a new generation to watch something that they don't necessarily understand. They're going to question, well, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? Because they couldn't.
Yeah.
Because they had to, get a better cell phone signal to do anything.
No kidding. We got to just mention The Ring. I think it's probably top 3 tech horror.
Yeah,
one of the top horror movies of all time for me is The Ring.
Now, are you talking about the original or the remake?
I'm talking about the Naomi Watts one because I haven't actually seen the OG.
Oh, sorry, the Naomi Watts.
Yeah. No. Yeah, it's funny because somebody else recently got that mixed up. The Grudge and The Ring and Paul.
The Grudge and The Ring.
Yeah. Loved it. Did you like the newer one? With like the viral video.
I didn't watch it.
Okay.
I didn't watch it.
Worth a look.
I don't
obviously.
I think I was just like, why?
Yeah, Rings. I think it's just called Rings.
But I should give it a shot. Yeah, I should. Yeah, great concept. That's definitely worth a rewatch. It's on my list to rewatch.
One that's on my list that's fairly new that I haven't seen, but I'm desperate to see is Upgrade. Have you seen Upgrade?
Love Upgrade.
Tell me why I need to watch it.
Upgrade is a movie that it's a passion film that the director had a chance to make in between movies he was hired to make. Okay. He had the time to do something he really wanted to do. Logan Marshall Green, really great performance, really great idea that, it's a revenge movie. It feels like an 80s movie, like a RoboCop type film. But a man who is paralyzed and his wife was murdered by mysterious reasons. He's a paraplegic now, is given another chance to have this upgrade done to his body because it benefits the doctor who doesn't have somebody to test on. Right. And it benefits, Logan Marshall Green's character for having a second chance. And he's going to use that second chance to figure out what happened and why was it happened to them. It's really, really
does have elements of
really
horror,
fun.
Right? Because
I'd say it's sci-fi action, but the kill scenes are horrific and a horror fan's liking. Nice. You will, yeah.
Cool.
Very fun
Well, that
movie.
was 2018. That same year, another one of my recent faves, and at least for now, it's still very relevant, is Cam. It's about a
Yep.
Cam
Yep.
girl whose account gets usurped by a doppelganger. Ultimately, this person,
Yeah.
thing, whatever it is, that takes over her account. She's blocked out of it and is doing better than she did, getting way more hits, way more
Yeah.
viewers, going up in the ranks. But it's driving her nuts
Yeah.
because she doesn't know who's this person that looks exactly like me.
And at the same time, nobody wants your identity
Right.
stolen, essentially.
Exactly. Then of course she starts to wonder, maybe it's one of my former fans or one of my viewers, my loyal viewers, that had something to do with it. And you meet
Right.
that character and he knows about these replicas. I guess it's not just happening to her. But at the end, it's still kind of left up in the air. We were talking about how you didn't like pin down what the hell was going on.
Yeah. Yeah. The ending is a bit confusing and maybe not as strong as it could have been or should have been,
Yeah, I would say I would like
because the
a little more.
concept was so good and original. I remember I slept on this. Like, I didn't watch this when it first came
Neither did
out.
I.
It was like so popular. Everyone was talking about it. You got to watch Cam. It's on Netflix. And I'm like, it's about a Cam girl. I'm
know.
like, do I want?
She's a demented
Do I
Cam
want to
girl,
watch that?
though. Even before she had her
Yeah.
account usurped, she was doing
Yeah.
very graphic, horrific things to keep viewers to. That was her
Yeah,
content,
yeah.
was like murderous
Okay,
stuff or
that's
faux murderous
yeah.
stuff, I guess is the better way to put it.
That's the whole idea, right? Of the story is like, what are you willing to do to succeed and build your own audience, even though it means doing really, really terrible things? And is technology allowing us to do those things, or forcing us to do those things?
And it's a great actress. The lead actress is the girl from Handmaid's Tale who loses an eye. You really get to see her do something she doesn't do on Handmaid's Tale. She's very very dynamic. I enjoyed
Great
the performance.
performance.
That was great.
Yeah.
So let's jump to 2020, where there was 3 offerings that I'm familiar with. Both of us love Host. Tell me about when you watched Host.
Yeah. Oh, I watched Host during quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was a time when I think we were all kind of going a little crazy, a little bit of cabin fever, really itching for something new to watch. And you've got this director who took advantage of the situation, um, playing within his limitations to his strengths. He had to direct actors out of their homes and how to do these scenes. And they used something that everybody sort of was forced to use within Zoom. We were all on Zoom communicating with each other, whether it was for work, whether it was to just stay in touch with your friends. And what a great opportunity to take that and it will age well too, I think.
So.
But in that moment, something that was so popular and common, and turn it into a story that was, 1, safe to shoot, 2, really well executed, and 3, just fun.
Just
really
the whole
fun
aspect of seeing somebody being helpless but seeing what's going on to them is done so well. To me, like
as a voyeur,
the same potency as Paranormal Activity, but in this new Zoom paradigm. That to me is the closest thing to compare it to.
Yeah, and the thing about it, though, is another one of its strengths is that there's something to look at the entire time.
True.
Sometimes in Paranormal Activity, but sometimes in Paranormal Activity, the camera is just like in a wide shot, and you're waiting for something to happen, and it gets kind of slow with the pacing. But with a Zoom call, there's something to watch at all times.
Plus, it's very short, if I remember. It's only like 65, 70 minutes. It's just over an hour, so that kind of helps too.
Really, really tight. It was just tight, I can't wait to rewatch it.
Yeah, me too. That's definitely on my rewatch list. One that's not on my rewatch list, but I'm glad I watched it once, came out that same year, called Rent-A-Pal. Very strange film about a guy who rents a videotape that's pretty much offering him companionship, where there's a guy in it just talking directly into the screen, and he kind of provides a faux friendship where he like leaves dead space for you to answer him. So this guy watching this tape and rewatching this tape, getting more and more attached to this character. But then, of course,
This
this character starts talking beyond the script. You know what I mean? And
that's
directly
fun.
at him and knows him. And
Would you say that the character is drawn to the tape because he's lonely
oh,
to
he
begin
is
with?
one of the saddest sacks of
Okay.
shit you'd ever see in a horror movie. Honest to goodness, they do it really well. He performs it well, because that's what's so tragic about it is he actually does have a shot with this girl toward the end of it, and because of his digital pal doesn't
Yeah.
go the way he wanted to, and that's when it really
Wow.
starts to get horror-y. So yeah, watch it,
That's
but I don't
great.
know if it's a rewatcher.
Yeah. That's it's funny because it sounds so much like this scene that they did in the 60s at Second City. It's called Phonopal, and it's this brilliant piece by actor Paul Sand, who is, acting with himself, but he's got a record, a vinyl, and he's interacting with it because he too is lonely. And this vinyl tape or recording is interacting with him, but it sounds just like this. It's
Yeah, that
really
does
really
sound very
cool. Like,
similar.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what was good about it is you don't recognize anybody in it. You know what? I might take that
Love
back. The
that.
guy who is the pal, the rent-a-pal, he's recognizable, but for some reason I can't think of who that actor is. I should know him. But did that pop up?
I'll
You
definitely
recognize
check
him?
that
Okay.
out. Oh wait, is Rent a Pal? Is it with Will Wheaton?
That's who it is. Will Wheaton. Thank you. Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
he's the rent-a-pal,
Yeah.
which is appropriate given what a fanboy
Oh,
he
that's
is.
great. He's so
He's
fun.
the
That
best,
guy's so
best
great.
part about it, probably. Yeah, he's very
Yeah.
funny in it. And then finally, to round out our list here is Spree, which is probably one of the most recent ones I've watched involving tech horror.
Yeah. Yeah. This was something you actually had turned me on to. I didn't know anything about it, and then you described it, and it sounded like a blast.
It was a blast.
It's and the actor from Stranger
Right.
Things.
Steve from is it Steve? Steve from Stranger Things?
Yeah.
His name is Joe something.
Yeah. He's like from like the Chicagoland.
Huh.
He's from like Arlington Heights. Joe Keery.
Joe Keery, okay.
Yeah, he is so good in this.
He really is. He
Yeah.
showed range
Basically,
big time. He does it
yeah.
in Stranger Things alone. His character's evolved a lot in Stranger Things,
yeah.
but this is different.
He carries this movie though. He
does.
carries this entire movie, and at times, he's by himself. The rest of the time, he's got, he drives a ride share. He drives a ride share, but he also has his own YouTube
Live
channel
stream,
and
yeah.
or live stream channel, and it's something world, isn't it? Like
yes, it's his character's name in that
yeah.
world. But he's kind of a cheesy guy. He's not somebody people really would want to watch. He kind of is catching on to that. So his gimmick is, well, we'll start killing people and live streaming it.
Kind of like Cam in the sense that you've got, this idea of people just watching horrific acts. Not necessarily like they know it's true or not, but they're still watching it and they're encouraging things to happen. There's actually, we haven't talked about this. We were talking about upcoming TV shows earlier, you and I, and there's that new Korean zombie show.
Yeah, that's out on Netflix.
It's out. I'm like on episode 5 or
it's
something.
good?
But it's fun. Okay. It's very fun. Yeah. And there's an episode where it's cool. Like in the middle of this series, they introduce like a new character on the side. And he reminds me a lot of Joe Keery's character. He is somebody who is live streaming, but on purpose puts himself into harm's way just to get the views, which is
that sounds good.
Well, it's that idea is so scary because who is going to it's a matter of time before someone live streams something horrific and then we're not allowed to but we're not allowed to like enjoy this as entertainment anymore. We won't be because it'll be too horrific, but while we can, being a passenger along this ride in this movie is a blast.
Most of the passengers that I remember have it coming.
Kind of.
It's like
kind of deserve
you're not really feeling bad for the people he takes out because they're pretty awful for the most part.
Yeah, like one guy I think is like a white supremacist.
There's a
Yeah,
Karen. He
stuff
takes
like
out.
that.
Frankie Grande he takes out. So if you're not a fan of Frankie Grande, you can get to see him. Ariana Grande's brother. He's one of the passengers. So he gets taken out good. Big Brother fans would know him from season 15. So if you ever
Wow.
dreamed of seeing him brutally killed, this is the movie for you. It's
Sure
fun. It's a
opportunity.
blast, and it's like comedy horror. It's really a way to look at it.
Yeah.
It doesn't take itself too
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah. It's well, there's one more.
Oh.
And I don't know if it's something that you watched, but the only reason I'm going to bring it up is Possessor.
Oh yes, I saw Possessor at the Music Box. I liked Possessor.
Yes, same here. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because of the weird similarities to Existence.
Well, you know who the director is.
Well, it's Brandon Cronenberg.
Cronenberg's son.
My point is that it's almost in a way like a sequel. In the sense that, well, first of all, Jennifer Jason Leigh is in both films. And in these positions of power, setting up people to like get killed essentially, and Possessor, creating this really weird, I don't know.
I mean, it starts as like an assassin body hopping situation.
Yes. Body hopping. Yeah. It's a really hard movie to explain what's going on, because when you're watching it, you're also, the performances are fantastic, but you're also wondering what's going on the entire time, like a mystery. But what's going on with the Cronenberg family?
I know. There's trauma there. There's something in the water. Don't you think? In the woods.
Don't you think there was a time where Brandon Cronenberg is in grade school and the art teacher calls home and says, "Mr. Cronenberg, we got to talk to you about Brandon's artwork. It's really really disturbing."
His dad not only directs and writes these horrific things, he was a killer in a horror movie from the 80s. David Cronenberg was he had a sack on his head and button eyes.
Oh, no, yeah.
What was that? Something?
He was in Nightbreed. He was... he had a cool name too, but he had that sack with the button eyes.
That was horrifying.
Yeah, and he did a great job.
Pre-Coraline button eye thing just works.
Oh man, yeah. But yeah, I wanted to bring up Possessor because of the similarities.
It's so visceral too. You feel like you're in it yourself a lot of the time. Like just the
idea of, like, are we asleep? Are we awake while this is happening? What's real?
Right.
Yeah.
And it has that heartthrob that the girls will like from Girls. The show Girls was the boyfriend to Williams.
He's like
early days.
He's like Skeet Ulrich is to Johnny Depp as this guy Abbott is to Kit Harington.
Yes. I think that's very accurate.
I think his name is Abbott or something, but
he's good. He was in Black Bear, which I recently saw, and he was good in that too.
He's great. I know we were going to talk about more TV shows, but that might be another episode.
That probably should be another episode. We got the Archive 81 that inspired us digging up the films, but we have started to dig up some tech in the TV and stream space too, tech horror, which we can talk about later. I think
there's a wealth of that, between Twilight Zone and there's a ton of shows. We'll get to it. So that concludes today's episode.
Hell yeah. Thanks for listening, folks.
I also wanted to plug the fact that we put these episodes up on YouTube on Fridays. So if you want to follow us on social media, these usually go, I'm playing around with the time release on Friday nights because we're here in Chicago, and I'm playing with the idea that, like, maybe it's good to put out at 6 p.m. here, maybe 7 p.m. But check out the Sea Monsters YouTube channel, a link to it on our Twitter. And you can kind of laugh along with us and see our stupid mugs.
Lucky you.
All right. Well, we'll catch you next time.
All right. Adios, all.